Hey guys, Andy Goblin from Andy Goblin Fishing. I'd like to do some videos, some how-to videos on things that we use, baits that I use, and how I use them, and where I use them, and the kind of equipment that I use on them. This particular video is going to be on spinnerbait fishing, preferably springtime shallow water spinnerbait fishing. I catch a lot of fish on a spinnerbait throughout the year, but springtime seems to be one of the better times that you're throwing it. So I'm going to go through the rods, equipment, baits, and things like that I use. Now remember, just because this is what I use doesn't make it right. Everybody's a little bit different on the equipment that they use and how they use their baits. But if you can pick up a couple tips from somebody, it just might help you catch a couple more fish, to put in the boat. The first spinnerbait that I'm going to go over is the one I use the most. It's just a 1/2 ounce spinnerbait, a tandem spinnerbait with a red kicker blade, gold blade, something in the 1/2 ounce size. I fish this on 20-pound mono line. I know a lot of guys like to use fluorocarbon. Seems the mono works the best for me. I tend to set the hook kind of fast, kind of hard, so a little bit of stretch kind of gives me a little bit of advantage for the fish to get the bait down a little bit farther in their mouth. I throw this on a 7-foot. This is a Impulse Zell Roller spinnerbait rod. It has kind of a moderate bend, if you can see that, and that's kind of how I like to use it. So this is where I'm fishing in the shallow creeks, backs of pockets, out on the main lake, up in shallow cover, or way up in the river. One of the other baits that I use when I'm doing this is generally a 1/2 ounce single spin spinnerbait. This happens to have a number 5 blade on it, a big hook, 1/2 ounce, something I can pitch up in the shallow wood, shallow weeds, shallow rock, anything that I can work the bait real slow. I can tend to work the bait slower with this than I can a tandem spinnerbait. So that's one I use. These are the baits that I use probably between 60 and 70% of the time, the 1/2 ounce size. But I also go to, sometimes, I go to a 3/8 ounce. If I'm way back in the creek, way back in the pockets, I go to like a 3/8 ounce. Something that's a little that I can keep shallow, keep going real slow, and keep it up in the cover. Same rod, parabolical bend, 3/8 ounce lure, tandems. This one I happen to fish, I generally fish it like on 17-pound line. It seems to make it cast better since it's a little lighter bait. There again, I also use, the 3/8 ounce. Here's a 3/8 ounce single spin. Here's a 3/8 ounce double Colorado. Any of these blades I use, these combinations I use up in the shallow water. I probably fish these maybe 10 to 15% of the time, not as much. Now here's a bait that I do fish probably 10 to 15% of the time also, and this is a big spin bait. I do this where there's a lot of big fish. I want to keep this bait real high in the water column, and I want a really big blade and a really big profile bait. As you can see, this bait here is a 3/4 ounce. This is just a homemade spinnerbait, a number 6 blade, 3/4 ounce, big hook, big profile bait. Now when I go to this, I generally fish it on 20-pound line also. Everything I fish on spinnerbait, I generally fish on mono though. And you can see this rod too. It's a heavier action rod, it still has the bend to it. I like for it to have the good bend to it so I can really drive the hook home and get the fish out of the cover. This bait again, real shallow water. I can work it out just a little deeper though. If I have a laid down log that's kind of laying down into the water, I can pitch it up real shallow, work it back shallow, and just gradually get it deeper and deeper and deeper towards the end of the tree or into the lay down, into the log, into the rock point, anything like that. But these are the type of baits I really fish on that. Now a lot of people talk about trailers to slow their bait down, and I use different trailers too. But the number one trailer that I use is just something. This is a little double tail trailer. There's another little double tail trailer. I do this because I want a little bit of action, in the back with the trailer. I do sometimes when I want a little more bulk, I'll go to like a Kitech, a Bass Pro, Strike King, any of those type, paddle tail swimmer. So that kind of works a little bit when I want to keep it up higher in the water column. I have more buoyancy with that type of a trailer on it. So remember, these are just tips that I use. You know, I have a lot of guys that say, you know, I want to use fluorocarbon on my spinnerbaits. If you do, and you like it, go ahead. There's nothing wrong with it. This seems to work for me for the way I set the hook. I want the bait to be in the fish's mouth really good. The mono seems to let it react a little bit slower, so I can't drive that hook home. So that's just what works for me. Dirty water, clearer water, it doesn't really matter. If I'm fishing the dirtier water, I'm going to fish something, you know, with the orange blade, something kind of bright, you know, something like this. If the water gets a little bit shallower and a little bit clearer, you know how the back of your pockets runoff sometimes will be a little clearer, I'll go to a big shad profile. You know, something with a shad type bait to it. Seems to work real well for me. So I hope some of these tips help you. You know, if they do, fine, that's really good. You know, I like to help the other fishermen out the best I can. If you like these videos, please hit the like button and please subscribe. And remember, everybody's a little different on how they fish. This is just seems what works for me. If it doesn't work for you, or you like to use fluorocarbon line, some people use braided line, some people want a heavier action rod, some people want to throw a 1/4 ounce bait. You know, anything that's working for you, you know, by all means, keep fishing. These are just things that seem to help me out to the last, about 40 years that I've been fishing. Like I said, please hit that like button, please subscribe, and thank you all very much for watching. Good fishing now.